What happens when royalty walks onto a talk show stage thinking the rules don't apply to them? In just 33 seconds, one comment was all it took to turn a simple interview into the most shocking exit in daytime television history. The View set was buzzing that morning. The audience had packed in early, phones silenced, ready to witness something special. Howard Stern sat in the main host chair, adjusting his microphone, shuffling his notes. He'd done thousands of interviews in his career. He knew how to handle big personalities. He knew how to keep control of his show. Today, he would need every bit of that experience. Prince Harry walked out to massive applause. The audience rose to their feet. Cameras flashed from every angle. He waved, smiled that famous smile, and took his seat across from Howard. The energy felt electric. This was going to be big. Howard started simple. "Welcome to The View. Great to have you here." Harry nodded. "Thanks for having me. So let's dive right in. You've been in the public eye your entire life. How are you handling everything that's been going on?" Harry leaned back in his chair, spreading his arms wide across the back of the sofa. "You know, Howard, it's been quite the journey. But I think people need to understand that my story matters more than most." Howard's eyebrow raised slightly. "Your story matters more than most? How so?" "Well, I mean, look at what I've been through. The press, the family drama, leaving everything behind. Not everyone has to deal with that level of scrutiny," the audience murmured. Howard kept his composure. "I think a lot of people deal with family issues and difficult situations. What makes yours different?" Harry laughed, but it wasn't a friendly laugh. "Come on, Howard. You're comparing regular people's problems to mine? That's not really the same thing, is it?" Howard sat forward. "Actually, I think pain is pain. Struggle is struggle. A single mother working 3 jobs to feed her kids might argue her problems are just as real as yours." Sure, Harry said, waving his hand dismissively. "But she's not being hunted by photographers. She's not having her every move analyzed by millions of people." "Maybe not," Howard replied, his voice steady. "But she's probably worried about keeping a roof over her head, about her kids having food, about making it to the next paycheck. Those are pretty serious concerns." Harry shifted in his seat. "I get that, but you're missing the point. My platform, my voice. It carries more weight. When I speak, people listen." The audience grew quieter. Howard's expression remained calm but firm. "Your platform comes from privilege, though. You were born into it." "Exactly," Harry said, missing the point entirely. "And I'm using that privilege to make a difference. That's what matters. By talking about how hard your life is." Harry's face reddened slightly. "I'm sharing my truth, Howard. I thought you, of all people, would understand that. You built a career on being honest." "I built a career on being honest about real things," Howard said. "Not on complaining about problems most people would trade their struggles for in a heartbeat." The tension in the studio thickened. Audience members glanced at each other. This wasn't going the way anyone expected. Harry sat up straighter. "Wow. I came here thinking we'd have a real conversation. But you're just like the rest of them. You don't get it." "Help me get it then," Howard offered. "Explain to me how having to leave a palace is harder than a veteran sleeping on the streets. Explain how being photographed at fancy events is worse than someone losing their home." "That's not what I'm saying," Harry protested. "Then what are you saying? Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like you think your problems are more important than everyone else's." Harry stood up slightly, then sat back down. "You know what, Howard? I don't need this. I came here as a favor." "A favor?" Howard's voice rose slightly. "You came here to promote yourself. Let's be clear about that." The audience gasped. No one expected Howard to push back this hard. Harry pointed at Howard. "I came here to spread awareness, to help people understand what I've been through. And I'm trying to give you perspective," Howard countered. But you don't want perspective. You want validation. This is unbelievable, Harry said, shaking his head. Do you know who I am? Howard leaned back and crossed his arms. Yeah, I know exactly who you are. You're a guest on my show who's currently disrespecting the intelligence of everyone in this audience. The crowd erupted in applause. Harry looked stunned. Excuse me? Harry said. You heard me. These people came here hoping to see someone humble, someone who's grown from their experiences. Instead, they're watching someone who thinks being born into wealth makes their suffering more valid than theirs. Harry's jaw clenched. You have no idea what it's like to live my life. You're right, I don't, Howard agreed. And you have no idea what it's like to live theirs. He gestured to the audience. But the difference is, they're not sitting here telling you their problems matter more. I never said that. You literally said your story matters more than most. Those were your exact words. Harry stood up from his chair. I think we're done here. We're done when I say we're done, Howard said firmly. You don't walk onto my stage and decide when the interview ends. The audience fell silent. Every eye in the studio watched the standoff. Harry grabbed his microphone pack, fumbling with the wires. I'm not going to sit here and be insulted. I'm not insulting you, Howard said, his voice calm again. I'm holding up a mirror, and you don't like what you see. You're twisting my words. I'm repeating your words. There's a difference. Harry yanked the microphone off his shirt, the clip catching on the fabric. This is ridiculous. I came here in good faith. Good faith means being willing to have an honest conversation, Howard replied, not expecting everyone to nod along while you talk about how special your problems are. Harry took a step toward the edge of the stage. I've done more for charity than you could ever dream of. Howard stood up now too. Using other people's money you got from being born into the right family. You want credit for that? The audience's eyes went wide. This was getting intense. At least I'm doing something, Harry shot back. What are you doing besides sitting here judging people? I'm giving people real talk, Howard said, which is apparently something you're not used to. Everyone around you probably tells you what you want to hear, not what you need to hear. Harry's face was fully flushed now. You don't know anything about my life or the people around me. I know you walked in here acting entitled. I know you dismissed the struggles of ordinary people. And I know you're running away now instead of having an actual conversation. I'm not running away. Then sit down. Harry stood frozen. The cameras captured every second of his internal struggle. Sit down and continue this confrontation, or leave and prove Howard's point. I don't have to take this, Harry finally said. No, you don't, Howard agreed. You can leave anytime you want. But if you do, everyone watching will know exactly who you really are. And who's that? Harry challenged. Someone who can dish it out but can't take it. Someone who wants sympathy but won't give it to others. Someone who thinks the rules don't apply to them. Harry pointed at Howard again, his hand shaking slightly. You're putting words in my mouth. I'm using the words that came out of your mouth. You said your story matters more than most. You dismissed real struggles. You acted like being photographed is the worst thing that can happen to a person. That's not what I meant. Then say what you mean, Howard challenged. Use your words. Tell these people why they should care about your problems when they have their own. Harry's mouth opened, then closed. He looked at the audience, then back at Howard. You're twisting everything. I'm asking direct questions. You're the one avoiding them. The standoff continued. 30 seconds of silence felt like 30 minutes. The tension was unbearable. Finally, Harry ripped off the microphone pack completely, letting it fall to the floor. I'm done with this circus. There it is, Howard said quietly. When things get real, you bail. Just like you bailed on your family. Just like you bail on everything that gets difficult. Harry froze mid-step. He turned back to face Howard. What did you just say? You heard me. You have a pattern. When life gets challenging, you run. You blame everyone else. You play the victim, but you never look in the mirror. You don't know me, Harry said through gritted teeth. I know your type. I've interviewed hundreds of people like you. Rich, famous, convinced their pain is special. And they all have one thing in common. They can't handle being challenged. Harry's hands balled into fists at his sides. This interview is over. It was over the moment you showed your true colors, Howard said. But thanks for proving my point. Harry walked toward the exit, his footsteps echoing in the silent studio. The audience didn't know whether to applaud or stay quiet. Most chose silence, watching this surreal moment unfold. As Harry reached the edge of the stage, Howard called out one more time. Hey, Harry! Harry stopped but didn't turn around. Next time you want to talk about how hard your life is, maybe think about your audience first. Think about what they're dealing with. Think about whether your message is actually helping anyone or just feeding your ego. Harry's shoulders tensed. For a moment, it looked like he might turn around and come back. Instead, he stepped off the stage and disappeared into the wings. The studio remained silent for several seconds. Then, slowly, applause began to build. It started with one person, then two, then a dozen, until the entire audience was on their feet, clapping for Howard. Howard sat back down, picking up his notes. Well, that happened. Anyone else think we should have talked about literally anything else? The audience laughed, the tension breaking like a dam bursting. You know what? Howard continued. I didn't want that to go that way. I really didn't. I was hoping we could have a real conversation. Talk about real issues. But the moment someone tells me their problems matter more than other people's problems, I can't let that slide. The audience applauded again. We've got single parents in this audience. We've got people working multiple jobs. We've got folks dealing with sick family members, financial struggles, real trauma, and they don't get to go on TV and talk about it. They don't get book deals. They don't get sympathy from millions of people. They just get up every day and do the work. More applause. So when someone who's never had to worry about paying rent tells me their life is harder than most, yeah, I'm going to push back. That's my job. Not to make guests feel comfortable when they're being ridiculous, but to stand up for the people watching at home who deserve better. The crowd roared. Howard glanced at the empty chair across from him. I hope he's okay. I really do. But I also hope he thinks about what happened here today. Because until you can acknowledge that other people's pain is just as valid as yours, you're never going to grow. You're never going to connect with people. You're never going to make the difference you claim you want to make. He shuffled his papers, looking directly into the camera. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk to some real heroes. People who are making a difference without needing credit for it. People who understand that service means putting others first. Stay with us. The camera cut to commercial, but the audience continued buzzing. People turned to each other, replaying what they'd just witnessed. Phones were already out, despite the rules, but texting friends about the confrontation they'd just seen live. In the green room, production assistants scrambled. No one had expected this. The segment was supposed to be friendly, promotional, easy. Instead, it had become a masterclass in accountability. Howard sat in his chair during the commercial break, sipping water. His producer rushed over. That was incredible. Are you okay? I'm fine, Howard said calmly. I just couldn't let that nonsense slide. Not on my show. Not in front of these people. The internet's already going crazy. Of course it is. But we did the right thing. Sometimes you have to call out bad behavior, even if it makes people uncomfortable. The producer nodded, heading back to the control room. Howard looked out at the audience, many of whom gave him thumbs up and nods of approval. So back on stage after the commercial, Howard introduced his next guests. A teacher who spent her own money on classroom supplies. A nurse who worked double shifts during the health crisis. a veteran who started a nonprofit helping homeless former service members. Real people doing real work without expecting praise. As they shared their stories, the contrast became even clearer. These were people with actual problems, making actual sacrifices, creating actual change. They didn't need to tell anyone their story mattered more. Their actions spoke for themselves. The teacher talked about buying winter coats for students whose families couldn't afford them. The nurse described holding patients' hands when they couldn't have visitors. The veteran explained how he'd been homeless himself before turning his life around and helping others do the same. Not once did any of them complain. Not once did they suggest their struggles were worse than anyone else's. They simply shared what they were doing and why it mattered. Howard listened, asked thoughtful questions, and let them shine. This was what he'd hoped the earlier interview would be. Substance over celebrity. Service over self-promotion. When the show ended, the audience filed out, still talking about what they'd witnessed. Some felt bad for Harry. Most supported Howard. Everyone agreed it was the most dramatic episode of The View they'd ever seen. Howard packed up his notes, shook hands with his guests, and thanked his crew. Another show in the books, but this one would be remembered differently than most. As he walked to his dressing room, he thought about the confrontation. Had he been too harsh? Maybe. But someone needed to say it. Someone needed to remind a privileged person that their privilege didn't make their pain more important. He'd spent his career speaking truth to power. Today was no different. A prince or a pauper, everyone got the same treatment on his show. Honest questions, real accountability, no free passes. In the end, that's what separated good television from great television. The willingness to have difficult conversations. The courage to push back when someone says something ridiculous. The understanding that the audience deserves respect, not pandering. Howard had given them that, and judging by the applause, the standing ovation, and the energy in that room, they appreciated it. The empty chair where Harry had sat remained on stage as the crew cleaned up. A reminder that sometimes the most powerful moments in television aren't the ones that go as planned. They're the ones where truth collides with ego, and truth wins. That chair would be filled by another guest tomorrow. Another interview, another conversation, another chance to connect with the audience. But today's show would be the one people remembered. The day a host stood up for regular people against someone who thought being royal made them special. Howard looked at himself in the dressing room mirror. Same guy who'd always been there. Someone who'd worked his way up, earned his spot, and never forgot where he came from. Someone who understood that real strength isn't about titles or bloodlines. It's about character. It's about how you treat people. It's about whether you can handle being challenged. Today, one person passed that test. The other failed spectacularly. And that's what happens when entitlement meets reality. When privilege meets accountability. When someone who's used to yes men encounters someone willing to say no. 33 seconds. That's all it took. One comment about mattering more than most. And everything unraveled from there. The microphone still lay on the floor where Harry had dropped it. A production assistant picked it up, coiling the wire carefully. Just another prop. Just another day at the office. Except this day would be talked about for years. Because this was the day The View reminded everyone that no one is above being questioned. No one is too important to be held accountable. And no amount of fame, wealth, show or royal blood excuses disrespecting the struggles of everyday people. Howard had done his job. He'd asked the hard questions. He'd pushed back against nonsense. He'd stood up for his audience. And in doing so, he'd created a moment of television that perfectly captured something important. The difference between those who serve and those who expect to be served. Between those who lift others up and those who put others down. Between humility and arrogance. The View had seen plenty of dramatic moments over the years: heated debates, emotional revelations, surprising announcements, but this ranked among the most memorable. Not because of who was involved, but because of what it represented. A reckoning, a reality check, a reminder that everyone, no matter who they are, can benefit from a little perspective. As the studio lights dimmed and the crew headed home, that empty chair remained, a symbol of what happens when you walk onto a stage, thinking you're untouchable and discover you're not. When you assume everyone will nod along and someone decides to shake their head instead. 33 seconds changed everything. One sentence revealed everything, and one exit proved everything Howard had been saying. The show was over. The moment was captured, and the lesson was clear. Check your ego at the door, or someone will check it for you.